So, welcome to the practical wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita. We are in session 17, which is a resumption of the series that we had started some time ago. And to summarize what we have done so far, of course, we had a catch-up session because of the break that I had taken on account of for the symposium. But now let's look at some of the things that we did earlier, and it would be of it would be of value to recap today. So we did Jnana Yoga, we did 30 shlokas there. We did Karma Yoga, but in the process of doing Jnana Yoga and Karma Yoga, we realized the importance of understanding more about Buddhi Yoga and Samabuddhi, which is equanimity. And therefore, I have put that little blue-colored banner, if I can call it a banner, I don't know what it is called, but to indicate that there were some additional shlokas, some 24 shlokas that we had, if not slightly more. Then we did Dhyana Yoga, which was the yoga of meditation and understanding meditation, where, if you can recall, we had that famous image of the lamp in a place where the wind does not move, or it was a kind of very quiet place, and that represented the steadiness of the mind of the meditator. So with these three plus the Samabuddhi theme having been completed, we are now in a position to look at Bhakti Yoga as per the flow, in line with our own thinking that let's go through the plan as initially conceived. And of course, the progress I have detailed to you. So the question is, what are these 16 shlokas? So I have these 16 Bhakti Yoga shlokas sequentially put down here, with, of course, a highlighting of the 5 shlokas that we will do today. But since this is going to be available to all of us in the folder, we could as well look up, if we so wish, for the next classes, the other shlokas. The numbers are very clearly mentioned there. So with that, let me begin the whole presentation, the discussion that we will have on Bhakti Yoga. So 4.8 I will chant, and it would be like this. And this is something that we would have heard too. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge. So the question is, what does this mean and why is it a form of Bhakti Yoga? Everywhere we look at why it's part of Bhakti Yoga. So the meaning of this shloka, the artha of the shloka is very clear, which is Paritranaya sadhunam. Sadhunam is the people who are right. Paritranaya is to protect. Vinashaya cha dushkritam. So all those who are evildoers, dushkritam, buri cheez, kritam, vinashaya. So there are 2 actions mentioned in the first line. Then the second line says, dharma samsthapanarthaya. That's the third action, to establish or re-establish dharma, which is righteousness. Then what is the consequence? I mean, with these objectives in mind, what happens? Sambhavami yuge yuge. So I is representative of the avatara. In this case, it is Krishna, but then we are aware that there are, Dashavatara, 10 avatars that Vishnu is going to take or has taken. And therefore, this is, of course, a total belief system. It is bhakti in the sense that you have a devotion, you have a dedication to the whole idea of the concept of God coming in human form. And this is a unique, it is not, so the difference between God coming in human form, as we have in the Sanatana Dharma, is different because many of the Abrahamic religions talk of only a one-time descent. It could be Jesus or it could be Prophet Muhammad. Of course, Prophet Muhammad is taken as a representative of God, not as an incarnation. And there is no prophet after that, and there is only the return of Jesus, as we have in Christianity, but there is no second Jesus. But in the Sanatana Dharma, the concept is that there would be an appearance of the avatara as and when the situation demands. And the situation is identified by 3 parameters: sadhunam, for their protection, Dushkritam for the destruction, and for the re-establishment of Dharma. So that's the reason why God comes in various avatars. Now, let me quickly run you through one of these commentaries because taking too many commentaries would take. So essentially, the point that is being made by D.M. Sinha, who was a bureaucrat, and he has this beautiful commentary on the Gita. It says that these two terms, paritranaya and vinashaya, have got great meanings. As has been said before, the appearance of the physical form is meant only to give expression to subtle tendencies. By the word pious is meant those persons with whom divine attitudes find expression. Similarly, dushkritam signifies people whose attitudes defy divine propensities, but these attitudes are neither fostered nor rooted out by the protection or annihilation of physical forms which give expression to them. The Lord's incarnation fosters and strengthens the divine attitudes on one hand. So the purpose of the incarnation is to strengthen the divine attitudes which people have so that they can overcome the incorrect and the dissipating attitude. So in other words, when you yourself get inspired at your time of crisis, the tendency to go towards what is higher and better is the avatara that happens within you itself, which is the strict concentration of higher energies within you, is also one way of interpreting this. And of course, it's a part of bhakti yoga because you need to be devoted to a higher principle and you need to recognize the higher principle and be dedicated to it. So dedication and devotion are perhaps English words that best signify bhakti in a modern context. Of course, you have bhakti in the very, very great tradition where you have various pujas, you have various festivals, you have various functions and vritas, which are a part of the Indian tradition. So that's 4.8. So that is where in the entire 18 chapters, we begin a degree of belief in a higher power, and that higher power actually being in our presence, in our midst. So that's the Tatparya of 4.8, which is the first of the shlokas that we have on devotion. So let me turn now to the next shloka that we have. And this is interesting because we move away from the whole idea of an avatara, which was mentioned in the previous shloka, which is, of course, a part of the selection, to this shloka, which I will chant first, and then we will look at the meaning. So, tat vidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshyanti te jnanam jnaninas tattva darshinah. So, what does this mean? Going to the word-to-word meaning, of course, we have a way in which the Sanskrit shloka can be unpacked and can be put in sentence order, prose order. So, pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya tat vidhi tattva darshinah jnaninah te jnano upadekshanti. So what does this mean? It means that if we have to understand about this incarnation, if we have to understand about God, if we have to understand about Ishwar, if we have to understand about Bhagavan, which are the various names we give to the higher power, then we have to do that by worshipping the feet of the teacher, okay, by questioning and by service. And this teacher, who is a man of knowledge, who have seen and not just know, that is, they have the experience of having deeply meditated about Ishvara or Bhagavan, and they know they are what are called Tattva Darshina. They are people who have seen the principles of all these matters. Te jnanam upadekshanti. They will give you the jnanam about understanding what the higher principles of life are. And this is the only shloka that we have in the Bhagavad Gita which talks about a human guru and says that the human guru is important. Of course, in modern times, the human guru may not be in the physical presence. It could be virtually, or it could be through a book written by the guru himself. Though these are deemed to be second hand, and first hand is, of course, to be in the physical presence. And given the ancient tradition of Guru Shishya relationship in India, you have certain behavioral expressions which are indicated here in terms of pranipatena pariprashnena. So you need to respect the teacher, you need to have devotion to the teacher. I mean, worshipping the feet of a teacher is a way of indicating dedication, respect, and an important attribute of the student has been indicated by saying pariprashnena. So unless the student has prashna, which is the question, he's not doing his job as a student, because to gather knowledge, to assimilate knowledge, and you are a student because you are ignorant, and therefore when you hear something, and if you say that you've understood everything without a doubt, then probably you are at a level of not only being a student, but being at the level of the teacher. So the point that's being made is a student has genuine doubts and they need to be cleared, and a student should not fear asking questions. But the parallel demand from the guru is obviously the experience of the guru and the knowledge of the guru should be freely shared, appropriate to the needs of the student, and that is why they are called Tattva-darshina, one who has seen the principle of matters. And the point that is being made here, there's also a degree of service, So service, sevaya, pranipatena, these are two very ancient markers. And you see, ultimately, we would all know that when we have not respected, let us say for our own engineering subjects, when we do not respect the teacher, we are also not likely to learn. So no matter what the teacher is like, if we respect the subject, which is important, then our learning becomes stronger and better, is the experience that we would all have gone through, from our engineering days to, of course, all the subsequent learning that we would have done. So you need to go to the expert. You need to go to the expert who understands, is the whole point that is being made here. And I would like to turn to S. Radhakrishnan so that we can hear what he has to say. So I'm going to open up page 169 and let me, read to you his commentary, because his commentary is one of the standard commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. So he says, quote, "Wise men will teach us the truth if we approach them in a spirit of service and reverent inquiry. Until we realize the God within, we must act according to the advice of those who have had the experience of God. If we accept what is said in the Shastras or taught by the teachers in unthinking trust, that will not do. Reason must be satisfied. He who has no personal knowledge but has only heard of many things cannot understand the meaning of the scripture, even as a spoon has no idea of the taste of the soup." That's a very interesting analogy. We must combine devotion to the teacher with most unrestricted right of free examination and inquiry. Blind obedience to the external authority is repudiated. Today, there are several teachers who require their followers unthinking obedience to their dictates. They seem to believe that the depth of intellect is the condition of the life of spirit. Many credulous and simple-minded people are drawn to them, not so much by their spiritual powers as by the publicity of their agents and the human weakness for novelty, curiosity, and excitement. This is against the Hindu tradition, which insists on jigyasa, or inquiry, manana, or reflection, and pariprashna, in the words of the Gita. But mere intellectual apprehension will not do. Intellect can only give a fragmentary understanding. We must open the whole of our inner being to establish personal contact. So I think it's a very deep commentary that we have, saying that we need to gather the knowledge, but we need to assimilate the knowledge. We need to integrate the knowledge through our questioning. And it's a combination of faith and reason. That's the point that is being made out. It cannot be blind faith. It cannot be only reasoning. It has to be a combination of the two. And it is that devotion, it is that faith that is the reason why this shloka too is categorized under Bhakti Yoga, or devotion to learning. Now let's look at a very interesting shloka. Now this is of course from chapter 6, and chapter 6 you would know is about meditation. So how does meditation and bhakti yoga actually link together would be a question that you would have. So let me chant this shloka and then we will look at understanding it a little better. So yo mam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachamena pranashyati. So of course, we have the Sandhi Vigraha and the Anvaya, which is, so let me read the Anvaya. Yaha sarvatra, yaha means who, sarvatra we understand from Hindi is everywhere, mam, mujhko, pashyati, who sees me everywhere. So me is of course Krishna. Krishna is the one who's articulating, as most of the shlokas of the Bhagavad Gita are. Sarvam cha mai pashyati, and who sees me everywhere and me in everything. Sarvam, sarvam. So one is sarvatra, other is sarvam. So sarvatra, हर जगह मुझे देखता है और सब में मुझे देखता है. Sarvam cha mai pashyati. And because of that, since everywhere you see God and in everyone you see God, tasya aham na pranashyami. मैं उसके लिए कभी नष्ट नहीं होता. Such a mena pranashati, and he is also not someone who would get destroyed, because obviously we are mutually seeing each other everywhere. So coming to a translation, of course, this is the word-to-word meaning. Yeh sarvatra mam pashyati sarvam cha mai pashyati. Let me run to the translation of this. So here we have, he who sees me everywhere and sees all in me, to him I do not get lost, nor he gets lost to me. So the Hindi of this is, जो पुरुष मुझे सर्वत्र देखता है और सबको मुझ में देखता है, उसके लिए मैं नष्ट नहीं होता, अर्थात उसके लिए मैं दूर नहीं हूं, और वह भी मुझसे वियुक्त नहीं होता. So I mean, it's a very, very interesting consequence of meditation. So meditation is, of course, depending upon who you are meditating on. So you are upasak and you have an object of your upasana. तो उपासना का जो पात्र है वो देव होते हैं या देवता होते हैं. So when you have established that kind of link with the devata, then obviously you are able to observe the devata as a part of your own mind every time or at all times, and you're able to see the devata or the atma. So this devata is representative of the atma which is there in everybody. So if you recognize the atma in other people, you obviously are not going to be led by the distinctions of race or color or gender or caste, because what drives the human being in front of you is the universal energy, that's the atma within, and therefore the atma is the same, and therefore you are never out of sight of Krishna, because Krishna is there in every being, and Krishna is never out of sight. You really don't have to go to a temple, because you can see a human being and you can see Krishna within, and therefore it's a kind of double win-win situation, I would say, where by the sheer practice, the sheer bhakti that you have shown in your meditation, since this is from the 6th chapter, as well as the fact that, for example, one of the tradition is to constantly chant Ram Ram. That is a universal, or rather it's across the entire nation that you find Ram Ram to be what is called a Taraka Mantra. It will take you beyond the current difficulties of life, and therefore you keep chanting that and you are totally involved in that, and that helps you evolve to a higher level of integration with other human beings. So all this makes for peace of mind, and makes for a society which is more integrated and not divided, is the broader intent of this particular shloka's inner meaning. So of course, I have here one of the yantras. So the dhyana yogi is someone who everywhere, what is the enlightened attitude? He sees me and he sees in everybody, mam pashyati, mai pashyati. And the consequence of this is tasyaham na pranashyami, such a mena pranashyami. So we don't disappear from each other's sight. We continue to be obviously found, integrated to each other, but of course in different form, because of my mental attitude being an enlightened attitude, which is an attitude, from the Bhakti Yoga, dimension or perspective. So let's look at what, Gandhi has to say about this, because Gandhi was, of course, a great bhakta of the Gita itself. And there is a very interesting commentary that he's written, which was put together by his secretary or his very close companion, Mahadev Desai. So looking at what Mahatma Gandhi has said about this, so he says, quote, this shloka is an echo of the great Isha Upanishad text. For the man to whom all beings have become Atman, what delusion and what grief is there as he sees the unity in all creation, right? So that is from Isha Upanishad. And then also from Shvetashvatara Upanishad, to the wise who have seen the absolute seated in the Atman, belongs the everlasting bliss to no one else. So this is, he quotes from these two Upanishads, because after all, the Bhagavad Gita is a summary of some of the key ideas in the Upanishads. So having summarized from Isha and from the Shvetashvatara Upanishad, the commentary of Gandhi says, they represent the progressive steps in yogic experience. Okay, one starts with seeing oneself in his near neighbor, then in his distant neighbors, then in still more distant humanity, and ends up seeing himself in all. And seeing oneself in another is to love the other. That is the same thing as seeing other beings in oneself. The next natural step is to see God in everyone and everyone in God. So that is how he has commented on this shloka, which I think is a very interesting commentary, in the sense that it is in consonance with Gandhi's behavior. Of course, politically, there are a lot of disagreements with his behavior, but if you look at it from the spiritual dimension, it is all traceable to his interpretation of the Gita. And you might be surprised to know that when it comes to Gandhi and the Gita, there is an interesting fact that many people do not appreciate or understand, that in the 98 volumes that we have of Gandhi's correspondence, Gandhi's article, Gandhi's works, there are about 5,000 pages of his observations on the Gita, including this translation of the Gita, because he used to, when writing to the numerous people with whom he maintained correspondence, used to keep quoting the different shlokas of the Gita in the context of their own issues, because he was a kind of guru to many people in that era, and a lot of people swore by him, because the Gandhians of the era always looked up to Gandhi to guide them, and he very happily took up the role of guiding anybody who came to him. And he, long before the internet and email, he used to have such a vast correspondence, actually handwritten by him, that he was one of the greatest time managers that India has seen, because 98 volumes of works don't come if you waste time. So that's an observation on Gandhi and the Gita. Now we have an interesting shloka from the 7th chapter, which goes like this. Mattah parataram nanyat kinchidasti dhananjaya mai sarvamidam protam sute maniganaiva. So coming to the meaning, it is like this. So let's look at the word-to-word meaning. Mattaha is beyond me. Parataram. So parataram is sabse upar wala, the supreme. Anyat kinchit, there is nothing else. Anyat kinchit, na asti, is not there. So Krishna is saying that beyond him, and he is a representative of the divine energy. There is nothing higher than that. Idam sarvam, right? Everything that you see in the world, sutre manigana. So if you imagine the world, or the analogy that is being given is that just like you have a thread upon which you have manigana, pearls, in the same way, the supreme energy is the underlying fact behind the objects you find in the world. So the image is, if I have a necklace, and if the necklace is a pearl necklace, then something becomes a necklace only when there is a binding thread. So that binding thread is what gives you the continuity of the necklace, as well as the identity of the necklace, and the thread of the necklace is not seen. So in the same way, the identity of the world is given by this supreme energy called Krishna or God, and the similarity lies in the thread being unseen. So God is unseen, but the manifestations of God are the various pearls, are the various objects, are the various creatures that we have, and the binding thread is the Atma. Like we saw in the previous shloka, Yomam pashyati sarvatra sarvam cha mai pashyati tasyaham na pranashyami sachamena pranashyati was the previous shloka, saying that you are able to see, therefore, this unifying thread across the differing physical forms that the various creatures and various human beings represent. So it is a simple translation that we have here. Hey Dhananjay. Of course, I'm reading the Anvaya now, but let me read the translation both in English and Hindi. I think the meeting is 1 minute. Okay. We have about 9 minutes left. Probably after this shloka, we can do a changeover. Okay. So there is nothing else supreme beyond me, O Dhananjay. On me, all that is here is strung like pearls upon a thread. Similar to what I had expressed. हे धनंजय अर्जुन, मुझसे परे दूसरा कुछ भी नहीं है. मुझ में क्षर जगत के ये सब पदार्थ सूत्र के मणियों के समान गुथे हुए हैं, पिरोए हुए हैं. Right? So I think it's a very, very strong statement of the key permanent presence. I would say permanent invisible presence. That's the phrase that I would like to use. So now let me look at, okay. So the declaration is Matta parataram anyat na kinchidasti. This is the statement. There's nothing beyond.
It's 12 o'clock.
And the examination and the illustration is idam sarvam sutre manigana. Because the protam or the string is what binds the sutra, puts together. And therefore, this is an illustration of the fact that God is the driving power of the universe that we see, of everything that we see around us. And that's the key meaning that we have from this shloka. I'll just pick up the commentary of Ravi Ravindra and sort of read it out for you so that we have additional insights. So he says here, Krishna describes what we usually call nature. 1 minute. Is this the right one? Yeah, 7.7. Yes. Okay. So his higher nature consists of the life force and consciousness. What is important to realize is the lower nature is also Krishna's nature. Everything is Krishna. There's nothing completely separated from him. The lower nature emerges from the higher nature. So what he's saying is even the pearl is actually Krishna, though we see it slightly differently as a different object, but since the thread is there behind. And there is also another way in which this is seen, which is if you take a string and the string itself you knot what are called the beads. So the string and the beads are just the same material, except the beads are seen separately. So you have some kind of very ancient japamalas where you actually don't have a string and you don't have a bead separately, but you take the cotton thread itself and you keep knotting the cotton thread so that you have a little lump which is like the necklace gem, but it is also made of the same material as the necklace string. So that's an interesting analogy that we have at times to understand this. So let us resume. Yes, yeah, Sunil, you were saying something when I had disconnected. So what was your comment, Sunil?
I was
Sunil.
asking what is lower nature? When you say
Lower
lower
nature.
nature.
Yeah, okay. So lower nature is all your material objects, that is Pancha Mahabhuta is all lower nature. Your Manas, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahamkara is all lower nature. Because it is something that is perishable. Anything that is perishable or modifiable is lower nature. Anything that is akshara is non-perishable, non-modifiable, that is called higher nature.
And what is non-perishable?
Non-perishable means indestructible. Indestructible. Atma is not destroyed in any case.
Okay.
In that sense. In that sense.
Okay. Other than Atma, everything is a chara.
Bilkul, sir. Atma is the only thing that lasts, and therefore we are told to identify ourselves with the Atma rather than get. Now, where is this? Yes, here we are. Okay. Rather than get deviated by the lower self.
Okay.
So let me come to the last shloka that we have. I hope you're able to see this. So this is the last shloka, the fifth one, and then we can get into our discussion. So this very question you have asked is such a appropriate question because now we talk about the fact that many people get confused between what they see and what is there behind. And this confusion is what this shloka. Devi Hesha Gunamayi Mama Maya Duratya Mameva Ye Prapadyante Maya Meta Tarantite. So this is the shloka. Let's look at the meaning that we have of the shloka. 1 minute. Yeah, here we go. 1 minute. Not moving. Okay. So here we have the word-to-word meaning. Esha is this. He is indeed. Mama, my. That is of course Krishna speaking. Devi is divine. Gunamayi. So we have Sattva, that is gunas. Sattva, that is tamas, which are the characteristics of the materials around us, including the manas, buddhi, and the chitta and smriti. All the mental equipment. Antakarana as we say. Duratya is difficult to overcome. Maya. So Maya is not is how do you define Maya? I'll just come to that. Ye mam eva prapadyante te etam mayam taranti. So only those who actually go to Krishna or who appeal to Krishna or who understand Krishna will go beyond Maya. Now, what does this mean? Okay, so this divine, so here is a translation and then I will go to what it means. Verily, this divine illusion of mind made up of the three qualities of nature is difficult to cross. Those who take refuge in me alone cross over this illusion. So here is the Hindi translation. Ye Devi Trigunamayi Meri Maya Badi Dustar hai. परंतु जो मेरे शरण में आते हैं वे इस माया को पार कर जाते हैं. So what do we mean by this? Okay, what we mean by this is the universe of appearances. You see, we always, whenever, from the moment we open our eyes or are able to understand, we only see differentiated objects in the universe. We are not able to see what was mentioned in the earlier shloka, Sutre Maniganaya. We are not able to see the string of the necklace at all. And no matter what we do, we find it difficult to understand that there is an Atma which is behind everything, because you can't see the Atma. You have to only understand it and experience it. But you cannot, if you open up the human body and say, where is the Atma? You will not find the Atma. Yet the human body cannot operate without the Atma because that is manifest. One of the manifestations of the Atma in the body is prana. If you don't have prana, then how are you alive? So prana is not something that you can pinpoint to be the heart or the brain or the liver or whatever, because each of us know that each one of these organs is important and the failure of any one of them will lead to overall collapse of the human mechanism. Therefore, the point is, I cannot see the Atma. In the same way, having taken the example of a human body, we cannot see the Atma in a human body. By the same token, we are not able to see the Atma in all the visible universe that's there around us, and therefore it's a Maya. It's actually something that confuses you because you're not able to see the reality. The reality is there is Atma everywhere, but the actual illusion is there is differentiation everywhere. So that is what the shloka indicates. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the share here, and we'll open up for discussion on these shlokas. Very interesting shlokas that we have. So let's look at the question that I first have on chat from you do bhakti to understand our limits or to push our limits as far as our idol. Well, I would put it the other way. We use bhakti to try to understand the idol. See, either our Ishtadeva or our Kuladeva is what we typically worship in bhakti. But it need not be just the Deva alone. You can have great devotion to a mantra. You keep chanting the mantra. So any kind of permanent dedication to either a sadhana or a practice is what is looked upon as bhakti. And the idea is that I, with my limitations, should be able to expand my understanding, because Sat, Chit, and Ananda are the very nature of this higher reality. So Sat means that which cannot be negated. So we said it is Akshara. Akshara means you cannot negate it. Chit is awareness. It has got all knowledge. And Ananda means happiness. So mostly we associate bhakti with Ananda, very happy. So we have seen many a times when there is a bhakti yoga based temple ritual, there's a lot of music, there's a lot of beating of the drums and all that. So those are all expressions. But to answer your question, it is to go beyond your limitation so that you merge with the higher power, and then whatever the higher power tells you to do, you do. So nimitta matram is what we say. So that's my response, but I don't know whether this response is a satisfactory response. So over to you, Sunilji, for your thoughts.
My point is, I feel that bhakti often people do when जैसे लगता है ना घमंड टूट गया किसी चीज का, तो मुझे लगता है कि ऑब्वियसली कोई सुप्रीम एनर्जी है, मेरे से बड़ी है, तो मेरी लिमिट से आ गए, तो मुझे लगता है कि मैं अब भक्ति करूं बिकॉज मेरा अपना घमंड तो टूट गया. That is one point. Another point is, another way of seeing it is that because I have my limits, so if I have to go beyond those trigunas, that means level by level, then probably since we say that we ultimately want to reach a blissful stage, so bhakti is a way of reaching that. So मतलब जिसको मैं भगवान नाम पहले से दे रहा हूँ, वो मेरे से कोई पावरफुल चीज है इसलिए बिकॉज मेरी अपनी लिमिट्स हैं. तो एक तो मैं अपनी लिमिट्स पुश कर सकूं ताकि मैं पावरफुल बन सकूं प्रोबब्ली, बिकॉज वो इच्छा होती है, पावर की इच्छा होती है. तो दैट इज ऑल्सो वन सोर्स ऑफ भक्ति. अक्सर भक्ति करने वाले लोग वो भी देखे गए हैं, जैसे बड़े राजा महाराजा बहुत पावरफुल लोग भक्ति करते इसलिए देखे गए हैं क्योंकि दैट इज अ वे ऑफ टू बिकमिंग मोर पावरफुल.
Correct. So it is like the story of Prahlad and Hiranyakashipu, right? So Hiranyakashipu had
my question lies here is that मतलब गीता में जो भक्ति की बात की गई है वो अपने आप को पावरफुल बनाने के लिए की गई है या अपने लिमिट्स समझने के लिए की गई है? That is my point.
You see, the whole question of power is linked to ego, and भगवद गीता में तो आपके ईगो को डाइल्यूट करना है. Therefore, it is not about making yourself powerful. It's about putting yourself, aligning yourself to the powerful, I would say. It is not, you cannot make yourself powerful, but you can align with the powerful. And once you align with the powerful, then you become powerful without ego. Correct? Because आप जो है निमित्त मात्र हैं. आप जो है जैसे like Arjuna was told that look, you yourself may feel that you cannot actually have a fight with Drona or with Jayadratha or all Ashwathama, those warriors, because they are all very capable warriors. But if you have bhakti in the Supreme Lord, then my energy will be there to drive you. So you don't think it is your energy, Baba, but it is my energy through you. And then you become an instrument. So this is a very important concept in bhakti, which is I dilute myself. I totally negate myself so that the Supreme will enter into me and I will do what the Supreme says. And my energy as the Supreme is all powerful. Nobody can defeat me when I have that energy. But I don't say that I am the egoistic person with the energy of the Supreme, because the moment you start saying that, you become like Ravana. Ravana did all the tapasya. And then he said, I have got a boon from Brahma and nobody can kill me. The moment he gets into an egoistic mood, he has not understood his limitations. So it is to actually merge
मुझसे
you.
काम करा लेगी, सुप्रीम एनर्जी मुझसे काम करा लेगी. अगर मैं भक्ति का पाथ फॉलो करूंगा, ऑब्वियसली कर्म का पाथ तो मुझे सिखाया ही गया है, तो सुप्रीम एनर्जी मुझसे काम करा लेगी.
Correct, absolutely. And that is the way in which we should actually pray, because then, it is good, because you will be taken care of. You will not actually have any problems because the Supreme Energy knows what to get done through you and knows what should not be done through you. And therefore, that is why it says, Ananyas Chintayanto Mam Ye Jana Paripasate तेषाम नित्याभियुक्तानाम योगक्षेम वहां. अगर आप मेरे बारे में अनन्य मन से सोचते ही रहेंगे, तो I will take care of what needs to be done for you. So that is the assurance that we have in the 9th chapter. 9.22 says that. Right. So anyway, we'll be coming to 9.22 also in Bhakti Yoga. So we will be looking at that in the next session. Now let me turn to Rajesh. Rajesh, what are your thoughts?
3 questions. First is how to practice the shlokas in Sanskrit. First we'll have to learn Sanskrit, and one of the shlok, age is mentioned, yug. So how much duration of age is? And third is, in the one shloka is saying, you see everywhere me and all in me, so you will not get lost. So is it particular for the Krishna ji or some other gods, Shankar ji, Ram ji and all?
Shankar ji, anybody.
All for supreme power.
Yeah. So all. Yeah, sure. So since you asked 3 questions, now I'll try to remember the 3 questions. I'll remember them in reverse order. So I think the point is, no. Yeah. So in reverse order, when in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, please be devoted to me. But what it means is, of course, if you are from a Vaishnava tradition, you will say Krishna is the supreme God. But otherwise, you will say, you would say that Krishna is a representative of the Supreme, and Shiva can also be representative. Shakti can also be representative. Ganesha can also be representative. Kumara can also be representative. वो संप्रदाय के ऊपर. So it is just because of the conversation. It is, I would say, contextual rather than a general rule. It's not a generalization, it's a particular situation. But if you are from ISKCON, then you would say that it is a generalization also, but it's a matter of perception. So that is the answer to the 3rd question. Now, the 2nd question that he asked was about Yuga, right? So Yuga is actually in the Indian chronological tradition. India has a system of timing. A yuga consists of actually 4 parts: Satya Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, Satya Yuga, Treta Yuga, Dwapara Yuga, and Kali Yuga. Yeah, and when you add up the total time of this, it is 4,320,000 years in total duration. So that's what you mean by yuga. But as far as a human being is concerned, if you have lived life Ayurvedic style and doing japa from a young age and all the tamjham, if you do, then you're supposed to. So the astrological chart is typically cast for 120 years. So we are supposed to be able to live naturally 120 years, but how many of us can do that is, of course, a matter of a lot of other factors. Then I think the first question you asked was in terms of how to do
practice.
Sanskrit shloka.
Correct pronunciation.
Yeah, correct pronunciation. Correct pronunciation is just a matter of listening to correct pronunciation. So I will give you a website where there is the correct pronunciation. You keep listening to it. So you don't have to necessarily know Sanskrit, because Sanskrit learning is a long process, but it's like what you did as a child. You know, you learned the language and learned how to speak the language. I mean, you may not have understood all the words. So learning chanting is not at all difficult, but calls for dedication, especially if you have not done that. But it is not a rocket science, sir. Bas कान खोल के सुनना है और correct चीज सुनना है. So I'll send you. In fact, this Gita Super Site or IIT Kanpur, I think I shared that link. You have that. So there, if you go, you will find there's an audio, and in the audio you can run it, you know, so that you can have the chant as well as the translation, both in Hindi and English. So take a look at that. I am sure you will be able to find it.
आज ये संधि विग्रह फॉर्म भी कहीं अवेलेबल है?
सर सब कुछ अवेलेबल है सर. सब मैं वेबसाइट से ये कट कॉपी पेस्ट करता हूँ. मेरा कोई दिमाग नहीं.
ये जो गीता सुपर साइट पे संधि विग्रह नहीं दिखता है मुझे.
नहीं दिखता है. ये जो है औरबिंदो वाले साइट में है. I will send the link to you.
Okay.
Right? Because it's very, very useful to understand. And once you do the Sandhi Vigraha, you realize the shloka is very simple. You thought it was so complicated. It is a simple translation. कुछ tension नहीं है actually. Right? So I will send it to you because I use that in all my classes because it makes explanation easier. Yes, I will do that. You know, I will send you both the Gita Super site as well as the Aurobindo Gita. The Aurobindo Gita site is amazing because, you know, they have an analysis, they have a word breakdown, they give you the grammar, they give you a lot of things. So if you are very keen to pursue that line of action, I mean, of course, you should be keen according to me. Therefore, I'll definitely send it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Okay. Now, you know, Vishwaroop, and then I'll come to you, Sunila. Yes.
Okay.
Vishwaroop.
Yes, actually, I also have the same requirement actually, as I also want to practice this actually, Raj. So I also want to practice Gita the way Rajesh was saying. In fact, I had similar questions like Rajesh, and I do not have very much fluency in Hindi and Sanskrit, but Hindi.
See, please don't worry about your Hindi or Sanskrit and all that. Whatever sound you hear, suppose you hear a shloka being chanted, you just reproduce that sound. That's all.
Okay.
How did you learn Bengali? Tell me. You heard your mother or your father or elders in the family saying you learned Bengali. How did you learn Hindi? You learned Hindi by listening to your parents. So you just have to listen. Shruti hai bhaiya, kaan se sunna hai. Shravan, Manan, Nididhyas. पहले श्रवण करो. You just listen. Then if you listen with the text, you can make out better. Then when you listen with the Anvaya, you can make out even better. You know. So it is progressive deconstruction. But first we should listen to the shloka itself. It's not rocket science. And it's very easy, but you have to dedicate yourself. If you've decided that you're going to do it, then if you dedicate with the help of the link, see, I have got all the links of Bhagavad Gita, Baba. पूरा जिंदगी भर पढ़ाई करना है, मैं सारा लिंक भेज देता हूँ.
कभी-कभी पत्नी को पढ़ के सुना दो तो ज्यादा अच्छा याद होगा. Practicing it in real life.
Yeah.
और फिर जो सुनने को मिलेगा.
नहीं तो तभी तो प्रैक्टिस कर पाओगे. Because supreme energy भी तो चाहिए ना तुम्हें.
बिल्कुल सर, बिल्कुल, absolutely.
Actually, it's quite relevant to talk like this. Mera wife knows Gita more than me. मेरे wife Gita class follow से Gita class.
मतलब पत्नी की सुन लो, इसका मतलब श्रवण भी पाठ मिल गया तुमको.
माने अभी तो justification है पत्नी को सुनने के लिए.
पत्नी मुझे बोला तुम भी प्रैक्टिस करो थोड़ा, तो इसलिए मैं मुझे भी लगा कि
Absolutely. Okay, Sunil, tell me now. Sunila.
Yeah, bhakti means, what I understood is a devotion and dedication.
Yes. So that is the right way to understand it. You know, devotion, dedication without looking at the reason. काईकू करता ऐसा ज्यादा नहीं पूछना, करने का है बस.
So मतलब karma is also bhakti? What karma we do?
Yeah, ultimately, what Krishna is doing in the Bhagavad Gita is, he is charting out different paths we perform all of them, but we begin with what we are naturally inclined towards. Some people are naturally inclined towards bhakti. So they may begin with bhakti. Some people are naturally inclined. Most engineers are naturally inclined towards karma yoga. So we begin with karma yoga. Some people are naturally inclined towards jnana yoga. So they begin by understanding first. But every human being has these three. So this is called will, knowledge, and love or devotion. These are the ways in which it is expressed in the English language. So a human being cannot be without these three. So you cannot say, "Hey, I'm doing only bhakti yoga. I will not do karma yoga." Aisa nahi hota. Correct? It's a blend that Krishna has, but in the chapters of the Gita, he will take one yoga and he will take it to its ultimate limit. So none of us in our blend, we need not take it to the ultimate limit. The blend itself will work well.
Okay.
I do a little bit of karma yoga, a little bit of bhakti yoga, a little bit of jnana yoga. That mixture is very, very supportive. Rather than saying, today, 1 month I will do bhakti yoga, sir. January I will do bhakti yoga. February I will do jnana yoga. It doesn't work out that way because we are a combination. We are a combination, right? So we need to understand that. But
And like
it could be that between you and me, probably the proportion is different, right? I may do slightly more bhakti, but that doesn't mean that you don't do bhakti. So we need to understand that personality differences are on account of the content difference. When I say content, I mean percentage content.
Acha, like chanting the mantra or in the praise of the God, that is also bhakti?
बिल्कुल से भक्ति है वो. हनुमान चालीसा बोलते हैं, वो भक्ति है सर.
भक्ति में भी कर्म करना पड़ता है, भक्ति भी करनी पड़ती है.
हाँ, भक्ति में हाँ.
It is not just a noun, verb भी करना पड़ता है उसमें.
Yeah, absolutely. भाई हनुमान चालीसा में, yeah, go ahead, Sunil.
No, bhakti mein actually you should have faith. Bhakti is faith in God. You should have belief in God. Yes, God exists and our happiness and everything is linked with God. What Raj was saying, we are whatever happens is God is having some message for us. We have to take that message. Some of it maybe it takes time to understand the message, but you have to find out what God wants to tell us. Have total faith. He is trying to teach us something which we do not know. That is why maybe we are suffering now because of that learning is incomplete. That is bhakti actually. Mani means total belief in God, total belief whatever he does is for our good, which we will understand not now, maybe at a later stage of life. That's what I think, Raj.
जितना जल्दी सीख लो उतना फायदा होगा.
आप जल्दी नहीं सीख पाएंगे. आपका जितना कर्म है, आपका कर्म जितना है वैसे ही आप सीख पाएंगे. आप जितना क्या बोलते हैं, आप जितना सैक्रिफाइस कर सकते हैं, जितना बिलीफ आप डीप में जाते हैं ना, जैसे राज जो चीज समझ सकते हैं हम लोग नहीं समझ पाएंगे, बिकॉज ही हैज डेल्ट bhakti in lot of depth. He is reading lot of papers. His mental level has improved to a higher level. Like Rajiv Dubey आप नहीं बन पाएंगे एक दिन में.
By joining these classes, by joining his lectures, we also doing bhakti.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes,
in fact,
yes,
I feel that you are learning very fast. You are asking a lot of good questions. You, Garg, Rajesh, they are asking very good questions. In fact, whatever I have in mind, before that, you are all thinking of those things.
So, that sir, so from the next class, Vishwarup, I will ask you first.
No, I don't even, I have not even framed those questions. I have not even framed those questions. And Rajesh and Sunil and Sunilji Garg especially, he's asking very good questions. In fact, we are all learning to understand these questions from him.
But
I'm not saying I know those questions.
मुझे एक बात आपके विश्वरूप आपके बात में एक्सटेंड करनी है. जो आप फेथ बोलते हो ना, एक्चुअली फेथ, अभी आपने खुद ही बोला कि फेथ में एक्सपेक्टेशन ऑफ फ्यूचर नॉलेज शामिल है. तो फेथ जब आप करते हो तो आप अभी नहीं समझ पा रहे हो, बट आगे समझोगे, इसीलिए फेथ करते हो.
एग्जैक्टली.
तो इसलिए मतलब अल्टीमेटली आपको ज्ञान की इच्छा ही दैट वो फेथ देती है. और इसीलिए आप उस ज्ञान की इच्छा में कर्म करते हो. और वो कर्म करने के लिए जब आप अननोन में जाते हो तो अननोन का एक पाथ डायरेक्ट कर्म है, सिर्फ जो भी एक्शंस आप अपने डेली लाइफ में कर रहे हो, जब आप उसके अलावा कुछ करना चाहते हो और स्पिरिचुअल मोड में करना चाहते हो, तो भक्ति भी एक पाथ है उसका। मैं समझता हूँ कर्म योग में भी फेथ शामिल है।
Yeah, it is.
Actually, I'd like to share a very personal information with all of you.
Okay. Sir, this video will go public, so please don't share personal information.
No, it's the information which all of us probably have this problem. Everybody has. In the house, sometimes कभी गुस्सा आ जाता है, कभी we find that जो चीज नहीं बोलना है जब बोल लेते हैं हम लोग कभी कभी। तो मुझे लगा कि ये क्यों हो रहा है। हम लोग गीता क्लास कर रहे हैं, मैं योगा करता हूँ 1.5 hours 2 hours, प्लीज फिर ध्यान मेडिटेशन करता हूँ, पूजा करता हूँ, ये सब इसका बाद भी क्यों हो रहा है। तो मैं अपने आप सोचा कि मेरे अंदर जो चीज हो रहा है, इट इज बिकॉज ऑफ एजिटेशन ऑफ माइंड, कामनेस ऑफ माइंड नहीं आ रहा है। मुझे थिंकिंग प्रोसेस ज्यादा फास्ट, मतलब मैं डिसीजन ले रहा हूँ। तो मुझे लगा कि अभी टाइम आ गया है, नाउ आई हैव टू कीप माई सेल्फ, टेक मोर टाइम टू टेक डिसीजंस। उससे मैं देख रहा हूँ फायदा हो रहा है, बिकॉज योगा इज ऑल्सो, योगा में जब मैं योगा कर रहा हूँ तो आई एम थिंकिंग, मेरा योगा तो जल्दी नहीं हो रहा है, इसमें क्या हो रहा है, अपना मेंटल एजिटेशन कंट्रोल में नहीं आ रहा है, तो मैं योगा भी उस ढंग से चेंज कर रहा हूँ अपना पैटर्न। तो उसमें मुझे लग रहा है कुछ फायदा हो रहा है। फिर राजशेखर और सुनील जी का, राजेश सबसे बात करके भी मुझे फायदा हो रहा है, बिकॉज लर्निंग कुछ तो हो रहा है।
But yoga, if you are doing, I'll suggest you go with some instructor.
मेरे पास इंस्ट्रक्टर, देखिए लास्ट 40 years में योगा कर रहा हूँ, नॉट 1 year 2 years, 40 years कर रहा हूँ। मेरे पास 2-3 बड़ा योगी का मेरे पास चार्ट है, मेरे पास घर में इंस्ट्रक्टर आता है। तो ये योगा इज नॉट ए वेरी न्यू साइंस फॉर मी। 40 years कर रहा हूँ, नॉट 1 year 2 years.
So that's great thing. But sometimes what becomes a routine thing, na? When it becomes a routine, you don't focus on it.
Correct.
So I think Vishnu, probably we need to have a one-on-one chat, and maybe I can give you some advice, is what I would feel.
Okay.
Based on what you said. So I think it may be useful, because I too have done yoga, for a few years, but not, of course. So it depends on what you mean by yoga. If you're talking about hatha yoga and yoga asana, that is one kind of yoga. So how is yoga asana to be understood in the context of the Gita is what you need to understand. So if you understand how pranayama, how yoga asanas are actually fundamentally derived from the Gita, then every lesson that we have in the Gita, you'll be able to apply that to your yogasana practice. So probably the reason why your mind is still agitated is that the yogasana practice of yours is not being driven by a philosophy from the Gita. So usko thoda integrate karna hai. You have already the practice, the physical practice. There is a need for induction of a little more of the philosophy and the bhav of the Gita. So I'll maybe have a conversation with you whenever you have the time, and then that will be helpful.
Okay.
So with that, I think we can end this session today. It's 12:30 exactly. And thank you so much. I'm glad that we are back in action with our 17th session. So next week is 18th session, sir. So I look forward to that. And thank you so much.